Hey, this video has spoilers. I mean, you could guess that from the title, right? But still, I just wanted to warn you up front. Okay, still here? Good. No Way Home set up an equally exciting and heartbreaking future for the Peter Parker character and the MCU overall.
Not like this.
In this video, I'm going to be talking about all the future web threads maybe, that the new Spider film set up, and oh boy, there's a lot. New villains, new love interests, new job, more multiverse shenanigans, all that and more coming your way right now.
Hey, what's up? I'm Spider-Man.
A few of the big criticisms that myself and other vocal fans had with the MCU's version of Spidey is that he, 1, felt a little too much like Iron Man Jr. with his relationship with Tony Stark and all the wonderful Stark suits, as well as only really fighting villains who had a bone to pick with Iron Man, and 2, only really being involved in big universe-ending threats when a lot of the core of the comic character is that he's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Thank you guys for having me.
And while yes, No Way Home put Peter Parker front and center in a multiverse story, the ending reset almost everything with the promise that Peter would have more street-level adventures from now on. He no longer has his Iron Man connection, has traded in the Stark suit for something more classic and homemade, and it looks like he's stuck alone in New York City while struggling to pay rent, go to school, and live life. It's really unfortunate for the character, but it's great for us fans who wanted this street-level Spidey in the MCU. And now, with Spider-Man firmly established with a technical soft reboot, it paves the way for a team-up with other street-level heroes who might not be considered big enough for the Avengers.
I'm gonna die.
Yes, I'm talking mostly about Daredevil. Rumors were running rampant that Charlie Cox would be reprising his role as Matt Murdock from the Netflix TV show, and the movie wasted no time in officially bringing him in. In the theater, this was probably the first major cheer of many. The scene itself is arguably not that important, and you could technically cut it without affecting the story at all, but it was just so satisfying not only seeing Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock back in our lives, but he even got to showcase a little Daredevil action. He is a really good lawyer after all.
What do you mean?
But although No Way Home didn't have time for Murdock to fight crime in costume, the stage is now set for his return in the MCU. Where will that be? Yes, putting him in the upcoming Echo series makes a lot of sense, but now that Spidey is street level, I could get behind a Spidey and Daredevil team-up in the 4th Spider-Man movie. How awesome would it be if Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin was one of the bad guys for Spider-Man 4? Leading to Spider-Man getting a taste of the seedy criminal underworld of Hell's Kitchen and realizing it's very different than fighting universe-ending threats. Then you could switch up the, oh, Spider-Man needs a mentor formula by having Daredevil be more of a partner rather than an elder figure in Peter's life. When Venom Let There Be Carnage was released, it featured a post-credit scene that seemed to put Venom and Spidey on a collision course.
Until we've uncovered the
Well, turns out the resolution isn't what we expected. Yes, Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock and the Venom Symbiote were briefly in the MCU, but spent their time on vacation talking to Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso about all the crazy stuff this universe has experienced. And right when Eddie and Venom decide to go to New York to talk to Spider-Man, they're zapped back to their universe. It's a sad resolution until you see a bit of the Venom Symbiote has stayed behind in the MCU, officially teasing that someone is about to get infected. That's a great tease for Spider-Man 4, but just who's getting the symbiote? Will the piece that was left behind seek out this universe's Eddie Brock if he exists? Will he look different than Tom Hardy? Or will the film switch things up and finally make Flash Thompson Agent Venom like he is in the comics?
Venom away!
That would probably make the most sense. Think about it. They could have it so that because nobody remembers Peter Parker, Flash Thompson lacks purpose and enters the army, where one thing leads to another and he gets infected with the Venom symbiote, effectively establishing a new version of the character for the MCU, while still allowing Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock to do his own thing in the Sonyverse. So I mentioned that nobody remembers Peter Parker anymore, and while we saw some of the small ramifications of that, what are some of the other ones? Well, I can't help but think back to Spider-Man Homecoming, where the post-credit scene saw the Vulture, Adrian Toomes, talking with the future Scorpion, Mac Gargan. In it, Mac Gargan wants to team up like all good villains do in order to get revenge, but Toomes seems hesitant. And you can probably chalk that up to the fact that Peter Parker saved his life. But now that everyone has forgotten that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, what does Toomes remember? What if the side effect is Toomes being more willing to work with Gargan and eventually sets up a more street-level version of the Sinister SIx?
What?
You could have Vulture and Scorpion, of course, but then bring in other characters like the MCU versions of Electro, Lizard, Sandman, etc. Or something that might be interesting is, if you believe fan theories, Quentin Beck faked his death and has remained hidden in order to hurt Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But now that nobody knows who he is, Beck feels no need to hide and returns to team up with Toomes, Gargan, and whoever else to make a new Sinister SIx for Holland to face. Sounds epic, right? So one aspect that they made sure to talk about in No Way Home was how Ned promised that he would never turn evil and try to stab Peter after hearing about Harry Osborn in the other universe. But now that Ned doesn't remember Peter, could we be setting up his villain turn? We know that in the comics, Ned Leeds becomes the Hobgoblin for a little bit, and while it's clear that the MCU's Ned doesn't have much in common with comic book Ned, it actually could fit the story well. Peter ended No Way Home with the decision to not help his friends remember in order to let them live a less dangerous and hectic life.
You're so lucky.
Well, what if the franchise fixes that by showing that without Peter, Ned goes down a slightly darker path once he's at MIT? Maybe without a best friend like Peter, Ned experiments and creates the Goblin Serum. We know that Ned has shown interest in being a superhero in the past, so without a stronger moral compass like Peter around, he takes the serum himself,
Awesome.
turning him into the Hobgoblin. That would be a natural way for Peter to work his way back into Ned and MJ's lives and help get them to remember the way things were. Gosh, the teaser trailer for No Way Home was so misleading, right? Remember how it made it seem like Wong told Doctor Strange to not cast the spell and then Strange did it anyway? Well, in reality, Wong just tells him to be careful and leaves. And why does Wong leave? Well, it's actually because Wong is the current Sorcerer Supreme. In a surprising move that actually makes a lot of sense, Doctor Strange reveals that because he was blipped away for 5 years, Wong is now Sorcerer Supreme and has a lot of duties on his plate. How this plays out in future movies, I'm not sure yet. But Doctor Strange kind of needs to be the Sorcerer Supreme in the MCU, which makes me worried about Wong's future. But I guess it makes Wong's other appearances in Phase 4 have more purpose. It now becomes clear why Wong was the one to recruit Shang-Chi and Katie while examining the Ten Rings' power. But what is the Sorcerer Supreme doing working with Abomination? That's a question that still needs an answer.
That part.
As it's clear with the last entry and this one, not all teases for the future have to deal directly with Spider-Man. This film had the difficult task of not only telling Spider-Man's story, but also setting the stage for the multiverse shenanigans that will dominate the future of the MCU. The final post-credit scene wasn't even a scene, but rather the first official teaser for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, showcasing that No Way Home was a stepping stone for the bigger things yet to come. It's really impressive how the film was able to transition Spider-Man to more street-level hero work, while simultaneously making the MCU feel even bigger with the expansion of the multiverse. It will be interesting after watching Multiverse of Madness how much the events of No Way Home affect it. It begs the question of what exactly does Doctor Strange remember? Peter Parker has always been a little unlucky with love. More than almost any superhero, Peter has had to deal with hiding his secret identity while also trying to live a semi-normal life. No Way Home ended with him choosing to not tell MJ who he was, and that sets up an interesting storyline for the future. Obviously, Peter Parker and MJ are endgame, but in the meantime, what's going to happen? Maybe the storyline in Spider-Man 4 is how, since Peter Parker is officially erased from everyone's minds, Peter leans too far into his superhero persona, and that could have him cross paths with a superhero love interest? Black Cat, perhaps? Seeing Spider-Man develop a flirtatious relationship with another street-level antihero might be a little exciting before Peter realizes that in the end, he doesn't want an all-superhero lifestyle, but rather a normal romance with someone like MJ. After Far From Home's mid-credit scene, it seemed impossible to follow through on one core component of Peter's comic character. That, of course, being working for J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle taking pictures of Spider-Man. But now, No Way Home set up a perfect way for that to work.
That's outrageous.
Given that the MCU's J. Jonah Jameson now no longer knows who Spider-Man is, it would allow for Peter to not only make some desperately needed cash selling pictures and videos of himself, but also embed himself with the enemy in a type of keep your friends close, enemies closer type of situation. He knows Jameson won't stop in his crusade against him, so working at the Daily Bugle will allow him to keep tabs on what Jameson actually knows and doesn't know. Before No Way Home, this was impossible, but now the path is clear. Speaking of clear paths, it seemed like the start of the movie presented a reality where Peter would never have a normal life at school again. He was met with cameras, cheers, or disdain just while walking through the hallways, and it seemed foolish for Peter to think they could just get into MIT and start over. But wait, Peter doesn't go to MIT in the comics. In fact, he goes to Empire State University, a fictional Marvel college that we aren't sure actually exists in the MCU yet. And even though throughout the movie Peter was set on going to MIT, probably to follow in the footsteps of his mentor Tony Stark, the ending suggests he'll have to settle for somewhere else. There's a brief shot of Peter working to get his GED, which means Peter's entire school history might have been erased as well, and he has to start from scratch. There were a lot of cheer-worthy moments in the movie, but did your theater let out a lot of hoots and hollers when Jamie Foxx's Electro talked about a black Spider-Man out there somewhere? My theater definitely did, and that's because that line was a clear reference to Miles Morales, a character who continues to grow in popularity thanks to things like a stellar comic run and being the central hero in either the best, or maybe now the second best, Spider-Man film, Into the Spider-Verse. The way that line was structured, you can tell the movie knew what it was doing, and it felt like a tease for things to come. Now that Spider-Man is established as more street level and is undeniably alone, it would be nice to see him have someone in his life that can share in this experience with him. We're gonna get to the point soon where Spider-Man will be ready to mentor a young Miles Morales, and I'm sure we're all ready for that. I would predict that the end of Spider-Man 4 will feature a Miles Morales tease that will carry over officially into Spider-Man 5. Calling it right now. One thing that wasn't necessarily made clear was if we'd ever see the other Spider-Man again. Yes, it felt like both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield had meaningful character arcs, resolved both within themselves and with their villains. Like, Andrew Garfield caught MJ to make up for not saving Gwen, and then Tobey stopped Tom Holland from executing Green Goblin, like Tobey essentially did with his uncle's killer. Now I want to see them return as these characters more than ever before. Let's talk about Tobey Maguire first. What I think No Way Home set up is a way to finally make Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 4. I'm not even kidding. It sounds crazy, but in this day and age, I think it will totally work. The superhero genre as a whole will continue to expand and evolve, and it feels like the next step is to have two separate Peter Parkers in their own movies. I mean, how awesome would it be to have Tom Holland continue in the MCU as a young teenage Peter Parker, but then also have another Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire's 40-ish-year-old Spidey living his own life? How would the two be different? How would they be the same? I don't think it's that crazy of an idea to explore. But let's not leave Andrew Garfield out of this, because let's face it, Garfield's Spider 3, as he was called, mostly stole the show. Seeing his character in a better universe without being bogged down by a dense mythology surrounding his parents showcased why Garfield is almost the perfect Spider-Man. So how can we keep him around? It didn't quite seem like his story was done, right? While Tobey talked about how he found happiness and peace, it felt like Garfield needed a change of scenery due to not having anyone in his life, and his biggest claim to fame is fighting a giant rhino man. This one is just a minor one, but man, the world is really pushing the Captain America legacy hardcore, aren't they? Within the same holiday season, you have Rogers the Musical, which seems to be a smash hit. And then on top of that, you have the Statue of Liberty being fitted with a Captain America shield. For story purposes, I think this definitely sets up a hard path for Sam Wilson in the announced Captain America 4. Yes, he fully accepted the role by the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but now he's going to constantly see reminders of Steve Rogers everywhere he goes, and that's a lot to live up to. Peter Parker has basically been given a blank slate. Nobody knows him, so how does that affect his relationship with the Avengers? I'll end this video with an entry that suggests maybe Peter could now be in a great spot to form his own type of team apart from the main Avengers. Like, wouldn't he be a great leader to the young Avengers? That way, he could be the bridge between this youthful superhero team consisting of people like Kate Bishop and Patriot, and still be sort of connected to the old guard OG Avengers. That would be fun, right? Before No Way Home, I was partially convinced that Tom Holland was done in the MCU, but after all these teases and setups, I'd happily watch 10 more movies with this iteration of the character. What about you?